As we round the final corner of 2024, I want to reflect on the elections, one of the most eventful and tumultuous in recent memory, and try to gauge the impact of changes in policy, regulations, and legislation on the bond and equity markets. With the three-way gains by the Republican Party, White House, Senate, and the House of Representatives, I'm reminded of the adage about the dog chasing the mailman's truck, and when he finally caught up to it, he needed to stop and figure out what to do next. Probably what's going through the minds of President Donald Trump and the Republican Party right about now. First of all, viewers need to understand there are three key ways the president and the government influence our lives. First, presidents can implement change via executive orders. The second way is via legislative change. And the third is via the various regulatory agencies that interpret laws, create regulations, policy, and enforce those regulations. President Trump's platform is built on four key tenets: immigration, tariffs, taxes, and deregulation. Of these, the president has the most control over immigration and deregulation via executive order and mandates. On the issue of deregulation, there has been some recent case law that will also help with the deregulatory trend. It was a case referred to as the Chevron Doctrine, where the Supreme Court drastically reduced the power of government agencies to, proverbially speaking, act as judge, jury, and executioner. As I mentioned in earlier videos, most indications are that immigration enforcement will be immediate and initially focus on deportation of those with criminal records and people with existing deportation orders in place. Interestingly, the other aspect of immigration, border policy enforcement, is closely tied with the tariff issue, where the president-elect has threatened Mexico with tariffs if they don't restrict the free-for-all border crossings. Most people liken the imposition of tariffs to a tennis match. The US slaps a tariff on China, China retaliates by slapping tariffs on the US. The global tariff structure is far more complicated and Byzantine than people realize. It's more like a game of chess, only played in 3 dimensions. China, of course, is clearly in the proverbial gun sights, and there is bipartisan support to back that perspective. China has more to lose in an all-out trade war and will likely come to the negotiating table. It should also be noted that since 2017, from a period known as Trump 1.0, China's share of US imports has dropped from over 20% to now below 13%. Outside of China, a unilateral imposition of tariffs by the president via executive order will not be sustainable, if at all possible. The US has bilateral trade treaties with many countries and multilateral treaties such as the USMCA with Mexico and Canada. Most of these prohibit arbitrary imposition of tariffs unless backed up by data from the respective government agencies. We cannot rule out posturing, blustering, or bombastic statements by the leaders of the countries involved. But at the end of the day, it is highly unlikely that the extent of change will resemble anything that the rhetoric would indicate. As I mentioned in a previous video, estimates are that near-term tariffs, as modeled by JP Morgan's Dr. David Kelly, could add about 0.7% to CPI, which may feel like a tempest in the bond markets, but in actuality is far less damaging than most people think. Short-term, the marginal increase in prices could pressure the low-end consumers. On the other hand, a recently stronger dollar will help retailer earnings. It is my belief that before slapping on tariffs, the President and Congress will have to deal with the rapidly approaching sunsetting of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. This act was passed by a process called reconciliation and sunsets at the end of 2025. It will mean higher tax bills for almost 2/3 of taxpayers, as higher standard deduction falls and tax brackets creep up. It will impact wealth transfer and estate planning, as the estate tax deduction will almost halve. Bonus depreciation allowances and lower corporate rates will go away, dramatically curtailing the capital spending and profitability of businesses. The damage will be bipartisan, and I anticipate there will be some give and take between the Democrats and Republicans with things like state and local tax deductions, tax exemptions on tip income as bargaining chips. Don't hold your breath for a lasting tax law. I anticipate the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act will be renewed by the process of budget reconciliation and will not be permanent. Expressed colloquially, they'll kick the can down the road. This is also where the congressional math is going to be very important. The Republicans control the Senate 53 to 47, below the 60% majority needed to pass lasting tax changes. The Republicans post-election controlled the House 220 to 215. Since then, the 13th District in California flipped Democrat following a recount. Additionally, 3 Republican seats are open as President Trump has pulled people for his cabinet, namely Matt Gaetz, Mike Waltz, and Elise Stefanik. That means the Republican margin in the House is currently 219 to 216. It is going to be at least April-May 2025 before these 3 seats are filled via special elections or appointments. This just means legislative change will take a lot longer than most people think. And all of that assumes cabinet appointee hearings progress without a hitch. History unfortunately shows that the process of confirmation hearings are taking longer and longer as U.S. politics becomes more fractious and highly partisan. To put things in context, it takes 3 times as long to confirm someone than it did during the Reagan era. So, what does all this mean for the stock markets? The markets have done a good job insulating themselves from political uncertainty as lower interest rates and good earnings growth have buoyed stocks. Post-elections, the markets in aggregate have continued to rally on the prospect of more deregulation and welcomed the appointment of Scott Bessent as Treasury Secretary and to some extent Howard Lutnick as Commerce Secretary, both seasoned Wall Street veterans. The bond markets, which initially faltered after the elections on concerns about the inflationary impact of tariffs and immigration enforcement, have recovered as people put things in proper context. Even cryptocurrencies, which caught a bid following Trump's election, have given back some of their gains. In a few weeks, we will do a deeper dive on the various industries impacted by possible Trump policy changes. I'll close here by quoting from Warren Buffett that in the short run, the markets are a voting machine, but in the long run, they are a weighing machine. In other words, a well-developed long-term investing plan is the best way to grow your wealth rather than chasing short-term trends. Thank you for listening.